This story is called I'm a Sucker for a Book with a Horse on the Cover. When my dad died, I was in charge of all of the stuff in the house. And this stuff was years of collection. In fact, some of it all my life. So 50 plus years of collecting. And my dad was a collector. When I was young, he collected Lionel trains. And he had wonderful. We played with wonderful Lionel trains, as many of you know, the whole time that I was little. And then that moved on to collecting model cars, and then model planes, some boats. And that was his specialty. He loved like John Deere tractors, and he had every one. And he wasn't a hoarder. This stuff was nice, and he had built nice oak shelves. So the basement full, oak shelves full of this stuff and some others. And he got my mom on board because that meant traveling around the state looking in thrift stores for his collectible items. And she got on board and started collecting dolls and collectible teddy bears. So they just had a ball driving around, eating out, collecting stuff. But now, I'm in charge of all of it. And the other thing he collected, maybe the most of, was books. So the basement is just full of books. And he would also go to the library and get books that they were selling. So I need to say a few things about my dad and about these books. Number one, my dad read really crummy books. He didn't read good books. He gave me a book and I couldn't make 10 pages out of it. He just read really bad books. So that wasn't good. And the next thing is a lot of these books that he got from the library would give away these books because no one had checked them out for 6 months or 6 years or 60 years. I don't know. But I think it never occurred to my dad, why did no one check this book out? But he loved a certain look, a certain antique look about a book or certain cover on the book. But I mean, there's thousands of these books for me to go through. And I'm very reluctant to just throw it all away. My mom's still alive, and the deal was, I would go through all of this stuff and she would get the money. And of course, at one time they thought, they had a fortune in collectible items, which proved out not to be true. So going through these books, some of them I would just look at and discard. And some of them I would look at and say, well, I'll read a page and then discard. Some of them I would look at and say, I'll read 10 pages and then discard. And you got to know, this is horrible work. I'm just getting rid of all my dad's books. And we would look up the numbers if any of them were worth money, and none of them were. Because the thrift store had looked up the number, and the bookstore had looked up the number, and the library had looked up the number, and none of them were worth a penny. So now there's some exceptions to this. One of them was he had tabletop books, like really cool ones, and I still have them, like a Lewis and Clark, you know what I mean, like a coffee table book. So a big book with a lot of really cool pictures and maps and Lewis and Clark. It's one of my favorites. I like it. He has a big one that I kept called Cowboys of America, a big one I kept called Cowboys and Indians. So he had some really nice books. Those big ones were easy. I kept those. But the others were just wearisome and a lot of work on my part. But I just wouldn't throw away anything without at least looking at it. So then if I read the 10 pages or whatever mood I was in, maybe the 5 pages, then they would go into a separate stack and I would actually take them home and then put some more time into them and see, what I had. But I would read a little bit more and they were just junk. There's no describing how bad they were. Except there's a paperback book with a horse on the cover of it. So I take it and I start reading it. And I'll be damned. It's really a good book. really good. It's a really good story about this kid and this horse. So I'm reading along, and I was so happy that my dad, and the book had been read, so I'm imagining now that my father had read this book and that he had read a really good book, and now that it was mine, and now I'm reading it. And so I was really enjoying it. Like, it's the best book I've read in a long, long time. So I don't know about you, but at a certain point, I maybe halfway through or maybe 3/4 way through, I'm like, who the hell wrote this book? I mean, it's really good. And so I look at the front. This guy's name is Willy Vlautin. Willy Vlautin. And so then I've never heard of him, and so I'm like, who the hell is this guy? So I'm going through the first, second, the cover pages. And in the cover page of this book, there's a little note from my friend Eric. So my friend Eric had given me this book. This isn't my dad's book at all. Not in my dad's collection at all. Got mixed up in these millions of books I'm dealing with. And my buddy Eric had given me this book because he said it was really good. So my dad's still at 100%. Just 100% super crappy books. So I finished this book, and I think I texted my friend and said, man, that was a good book, and thank you for giving it to me. So he lives 500 miles away, so we don't see each other a lot, but and we don't talk on the phone at all, but we text each other once in a while, and we see each other 2 or 3 times a year. So he texts me and he says, hey, this book that I gave you that you liked, it's coming out in a movie. So it came out in a movie, and the book is called Lean on Pete. It's really good. The book's good. Movie's good. In fact, I took my brother to the movie. It was at some obscure, the weirdo movie theater downtown, and for 1 week. But I took him on opening day. He even said he forgot that they make movies this good. And I told him it's just because of this book and the story. The story is good. The book is good. Movie is good. So anyway, time goes by, and Eric, like I say, he never calls. So when he calls, I'm afraid, it's an emergency, or we know a lot of people in common, and sometimes they die. So I'm like, pick up the phone, like, what the hell? And he says, look, I need to tell you something. I know you're not going to listen, but you gotta listen. Last night, I went to a book reading of that guy who wrote that book that I gave you, Lean on Pete. He goes, he was in Reno last night, and I went and saw him. He's in Salt Lake tonight, and you have to go up there and see him. So I was like, yeah, I have this deal where it's really bad, too, of me. I just play along with people all the time, like I'm going to do what they're saying. The whole time I know I'm not going to do it. Except for Eric knows me. He knows. He can hear my head nodding through the telephone. He knows I'm full of shit. And he's like, no, I'm serious. And he keeps trying to explain to me, guy plays guitar too. And I'm just like, I'm not going downtown Salt Lake. Who the fuck you think you're talking to? So here's the weird thing about Eric and me. Eric is an artist, and he's a party guy, and he goes out every night. Every night. This guy is out. Eating dinner, going to a club, going to a showing, doing this art stuff, going to a band, doing some project for the city. He's out every night. I go out never. Never. I never leave the ranch. I'm not going anywhere. So he's blabbing along, and I'm playing along. And then he says this. He says, I have not been this entertained in 20 years. And I was like, the hell? So we hang up, and that really stuck. Here's a guy who gets entertained 7 days a week, 7 nights a week. He goes out every night. And what he said, I thought, you know what, damn it, I'm driving into Salt Lake. So I drive into Salt Lake. Let's do part 1. This is 10 minutes. We'll do part 2 in a minute.